start recording, and welcome everybody to rainy Friday the 13th version of Perfect Connections. Does anybody have a black cat in their household?
Nope.
So let's go around and we'll introduce ourselves or each other. And if there's something burning specific that you would like to talk about today, please do bring that up. I'll start it in the chat, and then also just as a reminder, last week we talked about resources, and we have this handy dandy spreadsheet that people are contributing to, which is lovely, with books and podcasts and listservs and YouTube channels and all kinds of really good things. So I'd say also, if this week you've run across or have a great resource that you would like to share with others, please do that. So I'm Susan Walker, formerly from the University of Minnesota, and now wherever I want to go, whatever I want to do, including today, Friday, October 13th with you all. And my resource to share is the link to the resources, which I'll put, for those of you who are watching, I'm going to put this in the discussion notes for the day. And I will call on Mary Kay.
Hello. I am Mary Kay Ashley. I am employed in Burnsville, Egan Savage, District 191 as a parent educator, and have been for 34 of the last 37 years. I've also worked in 5 other districts part-time. A comment on the question about the parent advisory group. Ours functions, you want to leave that? Just 2 intros?
Yeah, let's go around, because I think somebody might bring that. But anyway, yes, we're going to come back to that.
That's okay. That's all there is to know about me.
Yeah. You want to call on someone?
Oh, how about Nancy?
Hello, thanks, Mary Kay. I'm Nancy Trahey. I work as a licensed parent educator for Albany area schools in central Minnesota. And Friday the 13th became a lucky day for us when our second was born kind of hastily early on a Friday the 13th under a full moon. So we've turned it into a lucky day in our house. No black cats. It's a Friday the 13th is a special day. And I call on Kelly.
Hi, I'm Kelly. I'm a parent educator in northern Minnesota in Cloquet. I've been doing it for 5 years, and Friday the 13th means nothing in particular to me. So I also don't have a resource to share right now. Sorry, I was not thinking of that. But if I come up with one, I'll put it on the document. And I call on Nikki.
Hello, I'm Nikki Murphy, and I am a parent and family educator in Robbinsdale area schools, and I'm a home visitor. And I put in our chat the link to the peers folder, because I think just mentioning it here while we're being recorded, we were talking about it just a second ago before we started. It's a resource that can be helpful. It's a starting point for a bunch of things. I know that I shared within there my integrated observation questions and slides for learning targets. And I know Ellen put a lot of things in there. I think some starting points for thinking about specific topics and lesson plans. So it's a resource definitely to check out.
Thanks, Nick. Thanks. So a question that had come up, really an excellent discussion topic, is about parent advisory councils and how they operate in your site. I've observed parent advisory councils operating in very, very different ways depending on the school district and sometimes the individual site compared to something more citywide. So I think especially for anybody out there or anybody who is new to your site, that's also an interesting question, is if you're a new staff and then rolling along with the way that parent advisory councils work is one thing. If you, if your parent advisory council, say, have run dormant for a while for any variety of reasons, what it takes to kind of get them going, and whose responsibility that is, and what is the role of staff, and all kinds of things like that. So who would like to start and just ask a question about it or put in some feedback about their own experience with parent advisory councils?
Well, I can say something about ours. I'm not on it and I've never served on it, never been asked to serve on it, but right now it is functioning and it seems relatively well as a class that meets every week, but one week a month. It's a parent advisory council. The parent educator who leads the class is involved, I believe, serves on the advisory council, and also our coordinator does, I believe, also. And they come up with lots of good ideas, and they do some volunteering in some of our larger events. And some of them on there are pretty opinionated about what should be happening in classes, and they'll be happy to share that they're in a decision-making place, you know, in our district. And so they'll share that in other classes. So I think it's functioning well, but that's just my perception. But at least we have one and we have people on it.
So it sounds like they've established a format when you say that it's a regular running class, but then they just, one of those class sessions traditionally then is a parent advisory council.
Also, it's a free class.
Okay.
Which is motivating, I believe.
Yeah.
I think that's super interesting, and I can speak to Robbinsdale area schools. We have a parent advisory council that meets once a month. That's how it's been. And there was a question that was asked earlier that I thought was really interesting. And that question was, who, like, is there a staff liaison, or who's attending that meeting? Or is it just a, you know, its own entity? And I guess for me, I would ask the question, in turn, what's the goal of the parent advisory council? Because if that question is being asked, you know, it makes me wonder what are the perceptions, right, of who the body is and what the agenda is and all of those things. And I think the goal for our parent advisory council is to work in partnership with the program and to build a relationship, you know, and so to have that staff liaison there, or an administrator, for sure, at minimum a teacher, but probably the administrator as well, so that when they come up with ideas and they need flyers for it, or they need access to the resources that we've got, right? They need dissemination, they need it put out on various, they need classes to be told about it, or get it put into newsletters. I think it's really important that that we're there to hear it and understand it. And that way the teachers also are able to talk about it in their classes and answer questions about when families, you know, when families see things that the parent advisory council is putting out, then we're better able to say, oh yeah, this is so exciting. And I heard, you know, when I was in the meeting, I can say, this is how they presented that kind of thing. And so I think it's really important to have that administrative support and the teacher, like a teacher at least, so that they can go back and report to their colleagues. And so, yeah, I guess I just emphasize, what is the goal? Because if it is to work in partnership, then I would hope that they would have that representation.
I know. Oh,
Sorry.
Go ahead,
Nancy.
Susie.
Okay, I can speak a little bit about ours. In a small rural district in central Minnesota. We had in the past a very strong parent advisory council that met quarterly. Most of the parents that were on it came out of one of our most popular ECFE classes, a multi-age, 0 to 5, they were perfect. They represented all the broad age range, and a quarterly meeting. And there was a bit of an incentive. They could have one free ECFE class a year for their participation on the council. And they not only acted as a sounding board for us, but they helped as volunteers with a couple of our large events, not the end of the year one. That was kind of a thank you to everyone. But some of the other events that we had during the year. And I think a part of why it has almost disappeared is because of the pandemic. I think that just created a lot of difficulties. So we too, Kelly, are trying to build ours back up again. Our early childhood coordinator always is at those meetings, as is her. She has, somebody that has about 10 hours a week to act as a clerical person, kind of. So that person is always there to take minutes. And then our community ed director is also there also as an administrator. And then the teachers were always told they were invited to come, but it would have been on our own time. So not very many came, but the coordinator is also a teacher in ECFE and in preschool. So there is a teacher representative. I think, as I talk to our coordinator, because she's I've recently retired from full-time work. I'm still doing the parent ed, but not the preschool. So sometimes we'll have conversations and she'll say, what do you remember, because of my longevity, what do you remember about maybe how this was done? And I said, do you still meet as coordinators from around, central Minnesota? Our previous coordinator used to have that opportunity to get together, and they could do it remotely now. But so the reason why I bring that up here is because I think that important resource, she said they kind of fell off meeting during the pandemic. So I'm saying this on the recording so that should our new state folks who are going to be a resource for ECFE be watching this or listening, that maybe they would consider finding a way to support those coordinators, the new coordinators especially. Menafee always seems to have at our spring large conference, one session for coordinators, right? At least I feel like I've noticed that on the program plan. And I think that's so important. There are districts though, like ours, that don't financially support attending that conference. So it depends on all of, our coordinator feeling like she can afford or wants to spend her personal resources to be able to attend that. So I'm not sure that's the best or should be the only resource to coordinators for managing things like this. How do I build my advisory council back up? What kinds of things so that they're connecting and have a chance to share ideas? There's my 2 cents worth about that, because I think it's a very important resource that maybe in some smaller districts is really having a hard time right now. Maybe they're in the larger districts too.
Well, and I think since it's a mandated thing as part of ECFE legislation, right? You would feel, it would seem like any part of that mandate would be supported, right? Theoretically, right? It's just like, if these things have been identified, as being critical to the operations for ECFE programs, and if any of those are challenged, then that's where, resources and support are provided. One thing I was just going to say was, as like an ECFE outsider or ally, let's call it that, the times that I've, like, if I come to an ECFE program with resources, i.e. a research project that they benefit from, or, whatever, the coordinator, of course, my first stop is always the coordinator. And then what the coordinator will inevitably do is say, you have to talk to the staff have to be on board, but then also, I'd like you to meet with the coordinator, the parent advisory boards, and get them, which I would do anyway, because it's one thing is to get permission. The other thing is to get feedback and input. And especially if I'm, like, there were so many times that it would be like, if I'm doing something in the evening, like when we were building Parentopia, I really needed parent input on, like the color design, or, like how, if they use phones or whatever. And I can do that through a survey, but I also really appreciate having real life people there, right? And because you get much more of a discussion. And but to find what is that sweet spot of that time when parents are most likely, is it right after, right when they, is it during a class? Is it after class? Is it in an evening? And if it's in an evening, what needs to be involved, right? I mean, that's that kind of thing that the Parent Advisory Council has been incredibly helpful with. And then also sometimes serving too as an advocate for how resources are allocated. I have also found the difference in fact, some students and I did some research on this where we asked the same question to staff, parents, and administrators and got 3 very different answers, right, in terms of how resources should be distributed, or even something like the value of technology in ECFE programming. 3 very different responses. And, and if anything, it was the parents who were responding the ways that I kind of hoped that they would, because they were the ones that were serving, right? It's not our perceptions of what parents need. We should be going to parents. Anyway, so I've just always found such incredible assistance from the parent advisory councils. I've also received a lot of pushback and dominance and power that some of the parent advisory councils have taken on. I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying it's also another feature that some advisory councils can take on based on history, based on personalities, based on the relationship with administration. And then the final thing that I would just note is that in terms of the educators being there, I would say that the majority of the ones that I've sat in on, there has been a staff member present, but that staff member's own involvement in the advisory council has varied a great deal. Sometimes they're an active participant, they're part of the conversation, and sometimes they're a note taker, and that's about it. And then I've also seen staff that are highly reluctant to be there. And there's a kind of a, anyway, so hi, Carissa. We're talking about parent advisory councils.
Hello. Okay. I do participate, or I did last year. Their timing is different this year, so I haven't so far, but I do participate a little bit in ours.
So could you, I know we're catching you at a disadvantage because you just popped in, but could you describe, first of all, like what school district are you at, but also like what do parent advisory councils look like where you are?
So I'm in Mounds View, and like everything, our advisory council got decimated with COVID. So the last year and a half, they've been trying to rebuild it, and we've got 2 extremely dedicated mamas who have made it amazing, but they're going to age out after this year, and we're not getting a lot of people to come on board. Hopefully this year we can get a few. They plan, it really has kind of turned into fundraising, which is something they wanted to do. It would be nice to have a little bit broader focus, I think, for our advisory council, but they were really gung-ho about fundraising. So they've done Chipotle nights and jump nights at the trampoline park, and they do our Valentine's Day dance in the winter, and a huge silent auction that goes along with that. They plan our Touch a Truck event in the spring. So that's not a fundraiser. But they also do a lot of play dates. They try to do a play date a month, whether it's out on the playground, now we're in our motorhome in the winter. And there isn't really, they sort of have the freedom with that. There isn't, I don't attend those. There's not, I think sometimes our coordinator kind of comes and goes if she can, but there's not a distinct staff that goes to those. I don't know, does that answer the question?
Yeah. Yeah. That does raise another issue, not an issue, but just an observation. And when you mentioned about fundraising, is that tension that sometimes can happen with PTAs as well as, you know, where they become a lot about one thing, especially around fundraising. And sometimes it's that perception by administration that that's what the councils are kind of meant to do. And I'll tell you as a parent, sometimes that's a huge turnoff, right? Because you understand the value of, you know, because you want resources for your program and you want resources for the teachers and all of that. But if you have sort of a systemic view of ECFE and all the wonderful things that are part of it, and that fundraising is just one part of it. And so I think for some people, whether it's fundraising or if it's something else that seems to be sort of issue or task oriented with the council, that can make it hard for other parents to want to be involved. Because especially for those that might do some sort of finance fundraising kind of stuff for their jobs, you know, it's just like, oh, like one more thing.
Yeah. And these are both, well, now they're preschool moms. And I feel like it's out. I don't really know. The last year or the year before was the first year. So like pre-COVID, I wasn't involved in it. So I'm not 100% sure. I know it was a lot bigger, but like it's supposed to be an ECFE advisory council. That's the statute that requires us to have it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, but that actual ECFE voice isn't in there a whole lot. It's all preschool all the time. And it's hard to, I don't know. And then I'm like, well, at least there's something maybe. I like,
Yeah.
how much do I push back against that or whatever?
Interesting.
And it's hard when you've got a 6-month-old to like I'm going to be part of this advisory council. Your life is, so I understand that too. It's when they're like 3.5 and 4 that parents maybe finally feel like they have a little bit of capacity to try to be involved in something like that. So I don't know.
Well, I mean, that does oftentimes when you're new to something, right? It's like, well, that's like, I haven't been around long enough to really have a voice, and so sometimes it's a lack of confidence when you could be a perfect, I personally found having a fresh pair of eyes on long-standing things can be great, right? Because, they just kind of flow. And let me welcome Mary. Hi, Mary. It's wonderful to see you. Oh, you're muted. Mary, we still can't hear you. Maybe your speakers need to be up or your microphone need to be up or something. Nope. Oh, okay. And while you're doing that, I'll just let you know, we're talking about parent advisory councils. When your microphone works, we are dying to hear about, how it's going for you. Mary is a new teacher. Whoop, whoop, whoop. And so we want to hear how that's going, and then we'll get back to our topic, which is about parent advisory councils, and you can tell us how they work where you are. And if, as a parenting educator, if you've had any involvement in them. Okay. While Mary is testing her microphone and all that, I do want to get, one of the things that came up was meetings by Zoom. So do any of your parent advisory councils meet by Zoom, or are they all in person times?
Ours
So-
offers a Zoom option, but it seems like it's not, nobody hardly takes them up on it, so I'm not sure. But they offer it. It's not a Zoom only. It's like, here's an in-person and we'll send out a link if you want, if you can only join by virtual, if you want to join by virtual, but they kind of offer both for every meeting.
For us in Robbinsdale before the pandemic, it was in person, then it was only online. Then we tried to do hybrid. And I think this year they're going back to only in person for those meetings. And I will share too, because I didn't share some of the things that are going on with our, or that have historically gone on with our parent advisory council, because I think like Carissa, you're talking about a parent advisory council who is super invested in fundraising. Some of the other roles that some of our parent advisory council members have held, they've usually assigned somebody as the liaison to the legislative action committee within the larger district. And so having that connection and understanding what's coming down the pike for early learning. They've also had someone that's an outreach chair, kind of a community organizer. So you mentioned like I forgot how you said it, but an event that's happening with did you say like the trucks or whatever? So community things like that. We have a couple parties, one in this fall and one in this spring. And I also think they've had, and this hasn't been maintained as much now, and maybe they'll get back to it, I don't know. They've had like a library chair, because we've had a parenting library and a children's book library that parents have been able to check books out, and then they just bring them back. And so somebody who's been monitoring that. And so I think it's been like historically, I think they having these different roles, and I think there were more than that as well, has been a good thing, because it does speak to different skill sets and interests, and kind of diversifies what they're getting away from, like what Susan was saying about, oh, I don't want to just only go and fundraise, or feeling like that's what the aim of the whole council is. They also have had someone that's been pretty cognizant about bringing someone in from the district. So all of these different programs that are going on in the district. So, having the superintendent come to a meeting, or school board member inviting people in. There was someone that was in charge to also make sure that those connections were happening, and continually connecting our families to the district at large. We also are under the master teacher contract, which actually everyone should be now as of this year. But I think when I hear about like community education, I think there's some things there too that make it tricky. And I can relate to you, Carissa, in that our parent advisory council, we actually have been largely ECFE, but it's expanded to, they have expanded it to just early learning. And so this preschool piece, it's like, okay, what happens if it's only parents of preschool? It's actually ECFE that is required to have this.
At some point last year, one of the ideas our district tried, unfortunately, they didn't tell me. They every once in a while, I think it was quarterly again, because we had been meeting quarterly pre-pandemic, they would say, Nancy, we're going to come in. This is our community education director and our coordinator, and we're going to use your parent talk time during this particular evening ECFE class to have an advisory council meeting. So the parents that were there weren't aware that was going to happen, because, and they were really trying to come up with unique solutions for solving that problem. And like Mary Kay said, they found a way to do that as a part of their classes. But it sounds to me like, Mary Kay, your parents were aware that that was going to be a part of what they were doing, is being being the advisory council, you said, once a month, right? Right, Mary Kay?
Yeah, they had to apply to be in the class.
Oh, okay. Oh, so the entire class that they were signing up for was free. So-
Yes, and it goes all year, and the only people in it are advisory council people, so it just flips once a month to doing that that way.
Much better solution than what we tried in our district. It wasn't very successful. And I want to be clear, because I'm worried that I said earlier something that made it sound like maybe our district wasn't supportive of having the advisory council. They're just trying to come up with ways to come up with a body of parents to participate. And that was a solution that really didn't work very well, because the parents in the class didn't know until they got there that night that their talk time was suddenly going to be something different. So that wasn't a real good solution. I kind of like what Mary Kay is saying, to have a separate class. And then, like our classes, our council people before the pandemic, they were offered a free class in exchange for attending advisory councils. Well, it's kind of the same thing, isn't it then? And I think that might be a pretty big incentive for some of our families in our rural area, especially to get a broad range of socioeconomic participation. I appreciate that suggestion, Mary Kay. Thanks.
That's super interesting, Mary Kay. It was like a typical daytime class. I assume it must have been a mixed age then.
Yes.
I probably missed it at the beginning, sorry, but.
It is a mixed stage, and I think it meets on a Thursday morning.
Okay, interesting. Never would have thought of that.
I didn't either, but
Mary, do you think your microphone's working now?
Testing, testing.
Hey.
Hey, so good to see these faces. Hi, everyone. Oh my gosh.
So Mary, tell us who you are, what district you are with, and how it's going. And then please weigh in on parent advisory councils where you are.
All right. Mary Schrader. I am with South Washington County Schools. I am new here. I have 7 classes that I'm teaching. I'm having a blast. I'm just loving it. I have 2 on Fridays, an 8:45 and a 10:45. They're both toddlers and 2s. And so I try to get done to come to this, but today I just thought, well, I'm going to show up late, but I'm going to show up, darn it. I heard that this morning. You just need to show up sometimes. Yeah, it's people here are so supportive. I still haven't done my student teaching, so I have to figure that out, and we'll be doing my student teaching in the spring, but I have been, I have a unique position. It's called I'm a float. So I have my classes that I teach, and otherwise I am in other classes, helping however I need to help. Or if I sometimes sub. The most interesting class is the Friends Learning Together, where there are 10 children and 8 languages, and none of them speak English. And that has just been amazing, watching these skilled parent educators and childhood educators. They're really putting a lot into this class, and it shows. So I'm having fun. And I don't know anything about their advisory except that they're recruiting right now, but I'll find out and let you know.
Well, Mary, we are so happy for you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Isn't it great when you make a shift in your life direction and you kind of feel like this is where you need to go, and then you get there and you go, it's perfect. It's just what I wanted.
It is perfect. It is just what I want. I could cry. I love it so much. I'm having so much fun, and the connections and the people and the little kids. Oh, I got some hugs today, and oh, it's wonderful. Can't be, there's nothing better and nothing more important in my mind.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Oh, well, thank you.
thanks.
Our conversation about, so it also makes me, so here's my next question then. How do parents learn about your advisory councils? So if I'm a new parent, say I have a 2-year-old, I just moved into the area, I'm just coming into ECFE. How do I learn about the advisory councils? Is there like an onboarding orientation that your district does for new parents? And that includes discussion about, and we have an advisory council. This is how they operate. This is if you'd like to join them. I mean, I'm just curious, how do your districts acquaint new parents with the advisory council?
I
Council meets
believe-
once a month.
Oh.
And so there's the flyer that is created for those once a month meetings goes into our early learning newsletter that goes out to all of our families. And so, while I don't think they were approached about the parent advisory council, they're seeing that it exists and they're seeing when the meetings are, which opens the door for conversation. And then the other thing is that in the community event announcements in the parent for the families who are part of ECFE, we have our community event announcements at the beginning of our conversations, and that's always there. So we have the opportunity because we actually have the parents with us for PE to say more about what are the goals and what's happening and answer those questions. But for all of our other families, like Krista was sharing, like preschool, they're seeing it they're seeing it in the newsletter.
Mary Kay, you were gonna say something?
Well, in our district, I believe it was advertised in our catalog that that class was being offered, and it was people who had an opportunity, who wanted to serve with that, who would be asked to apply to be part of the Parent Advisory Council. So it went to every household with children 5 and under in the district by mail.
Yeah, same for kind of the email newsletter. And yeah, I try to let families know in my classes when there's meetings and events. And I usually try to include a small blurb in like my beginning of year logistics kind of stuff that we go through the first couple weeks. I always include the advisory council then too, even if I don't quite know when the first meeting is sometimes, but yeah.
Yeah, because I know being sometimes as a new person in a group, it takes a while to learn the culture, right? And and uh, not really being sure if that's for everybody, or like is there a representative from each of the classrooms, or is this something that you can only be on the council if you've been in ECFE for a year, or just things like that. So yeah, so I'm just curious how people get the word about it so they feel welcome, and that everybody can join. I know personally too, a lot of, like I was that parent, was like always on councils and PTAs and things like that. And then there are internal issues of struggling with diversity, right? That it isn't just a small cluster of the same parents, but that there truly is a representation across the program or across the school or things like that. So I'm always interested in how people get introduced to sort of councils and things like that, so they feel welcome to attend. Yeah.
Do most of the councils have that representative that belongs to the Legislation Action Committee? I think that's so wonderful.
So I am seeing head shakes. That would be a negative. Oh,
I wish we did, no, and I think that's something that, because we're just trying to get it going again. That would, for me, that would definitely be like a next step for them to like broaden that, what they do. And I thought I sort of half brought it up last year, but because we're so small, there just isn't anyone that can take on more right now. So maybe as there's more hands, that can be something. I would love that.
So would you also say that there's, and if you've already mentioned this, my apologies for not hearing it, but that, is there, where's the linchpin staff person for the momentum? Because mostly what I'm thinking about now is like COVID recovery, right? So COVID hits, things are, ECFE is getting back on its feet. And maybe some of the parents who are on the advisory council in the past maybe have aged out, they're not coming back or whatever. So is there a point person in the program who takes or has the responsibility to get the advisory councils going?
Sorry, a person in each district?
Yeah, like, so let's say you're recovering from COVID. I mean, not physically, but your program's recovering. And you want to regenerate the advisory groups again. And because maybe they too were sort of dormant. Is it a parent educator who does that? Is that the coordinator who oversees that to, like we'll reach out to those two parents remaining who were on the advisory board and say, hey kids, let's keep the show going. So is it the coordinator who does that?
Yeah, in our district, it's in the coordinator's job description,
Okay.
in fact. But I would say that it's a collaborative effort. In the past, we have one other parent educator besides me, but she teaches second grade full time, so only does one class a year at night for 6 weeks. So pretty much it's me who then talks with parents about it. It's a part of our handbook that I give them at the beginning of each class. It's a part of what I talk, and then I encourage them, during class when we're during parent-child playtime to think about participating in that kind of thing. And our community education director also collaborates with our coordinator. I offered some suggestions for what we might do instead of what we did last year for getting parents in, and I haven't seen any next steps. It's not a part of my job. I'm happy to offer suggestions, but and I'm concerned about it. It would be another thing I would need to do on my own time if I was going to, you know what I mean? Meet with her. But I think, anyway, I'm not sure where we're falling apart. I'm not sure. I have suspicion, but I'm not sure. Yeah. So it's good to have more suggestions from all of you, ideas of things you've tried, so that I can pass along those suggestions. Because it is important to, everybody values it in our district. Nobody doesn't value it. It's just a matter of making sure somebody's got that on there.
Because here's the other thing, and I'm just going to, it's in my brain, so I have to say it, and then I'll stop, and then you guys can talk about like the process piece, is the value of the parent advisory councils as a springboard for later family engagement in schools.
Absolutely.
And
amen.
Yeah, because there's so much, like I could write a book about like the value of ECFE for family engagement down the road, right? I mean, it's about parenting, but also I think one of the things that doesn't get discussed much about ECFE is that it is a program within a school district, right? And so when we talk about all of the challenges and hopes and dreams of public education, right? Because there's oftentimes a disconnect in the early years, you know, the focus is on like K-12. And then, you know, we look at Minnesota and there's this program that is integrated into the schools with not just parenting, right, which is fabulous, but also with engagement in the schools, right, with having councils, having advisory councils, having parents sit on councils with licensed teachers and with school administrators, and having that opportunity, whether it's just fundraising or whether it's the whole shebang, right? And collaborating with each other, feeling that they're representing their, not just their families, but also the voices of other parents, that, you know, there is such a value to that as being a springboard and a modeling to parents of what that family engagement could look like. And I think it's also of great value during the early childhood years, because again, it's those years that parents are so intimately involved with their children. And then by the time they hit elementary school, right, I mean, there's stress and the kids are going in different directions and things like that. And there is just this huge shift that happens when kids are in elementary school, that I do think that if there's some momentum and parents have really felt welcomed and that their voices matter in schools, that, and especially the parents we don't hear that much from, is that that can be sustained then in elementary school. Okay, so I've said that. All right, now we can go back to the process piece. So, yeah.
I see a lot of head bobbing. I think we all agree with you about how important that can be, and probably have seen how it happens. You know, somebody that the parent educator encouraged to be in the parent advisory council when they were in ECFE, who then, as they aged out, as who was talking about that, I guess, Carissa, we were talking about that then, I mean, I've seen it happen twice, that they then became the president of the parent organization for the elementary school. So I absolutely, I agree with you, Susan. I think it's so important for lots of different reasons. That's just one reason.
Right.
And aren't there still federal mandates about having parent involvement programming for like title programs? That used to be a part of what I did when I was doing what we called family outreach in our district, but really it was title money that was used to link me with parents, not just through 5 years of age, but through 12th grade as well.
Mm-hmm.
So part of that money that they used to have me do that came out of those dollars, those title dollars. Maybe they don't exist anymore.
Hopefully.
Yeah.
You know, I know parent involvement, like through Head Start, was part of the mandate from the time everything was written in the 60s. And in fact, I've marveled at, it may not be executed perfectly across the board because Head Start is massive, right? But that initiative, that belief of parent involvement and parent engagement, you know, was so strong from the get-go. And that I think that too, there's probably been some literature about what that has meant to put parents in an advocacy role early on in their children's lives, and what that might mean to their own development as adults, you know, so, yeah.
It makes perfect sense, everything you said. It's like, that's what should be happening.
Right, yeah.
This was a good topic. I hope Kelly's able to go back and watch it. And so thanks, Kelly, for bringing it to all of us.
Yeah, me too. Well, we're just about at 1. Does anybody have anything else they'd like to share? A reminder about the Menafee workshop or fall professional development event, which I think is November 3rd. I should get the date straight because I guess I'm supposed to be there. But anyway, there are a lot of really good workshops, breakouts, that sort of thing. And Linda is we'll definitely make sure that all the Zoom connections work and all of that. So put in a plug for that. But anything else anybody has before we break for the day? Well, Mary, it is absolutely wonderful to see you, and I hope you can join us and as you say, show up. Can come whenever you can, last 5 minutes, that works too. So,
Okay, my class ends at 12:15, so if everybody gets out the door, I'll just hop on right then, and if you don't mind, I'll eat my lunch with you. Okay.
that's wonderful. That's
All right.
wonderful. Well, thanks, everybody. Have a great week, and we'll see you next week.